Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of Corel Gallane. Now that I've actually cleared my throat, I can actually say this in a clearer voice. Welcome back. We're talking about Fall of Light, chapters 13 and 14. So we're three-fourths through book 2 of it. And I hope this will be a shorter one than yesterday's really way too long ramble that went off track quite a bit. And yeah, let's just get into it, shall we? Cheers. So while there is at least a little of philosophy in this one as well, there's more action and world building going on in those two chapters that are also like slightly shorter than chapters 11 and 12. And we're back in Umto's Felak. At this point, still just a city and not a warren. So there's that. And we're there with Arathan and Korea and Hood and all the other guys and girls. And Arathan and Korea go to investigate the Azath house, because this is like the interesting thing. The Azath houses still, turn up somewhere or are built by builders, depending on what we know about these things. And yeah, we'll see where that is going. If we learn more about that, but I guess it's builders building Azath houses that are then needed somewhere, and we already know how that works. They keep down powerful things to keep some kind of balance or whatever you might call it. Anyway, Korea takes that acorn, and I guess the whole like focus on acorns is maybe another one of those giveaways or like hints that there is some kind of connection between Korea, Delat, and everyone's favorite Seven Cities mage with the same name. Um, we'll see. Anyway, she takes that acorn with the god that was like captured in there a couple of like chapters ago and throws it into the yard of the Azath house just because why not? And the result obviously is that another tree grows up and tries to hold down that god, and it's kind of difficult. So what does Hood do? And his brother Hout? Well, they send the Senegal in there to get rid of him, mostly. And I just really love that fact. And we see that battle. And the interesting thing there that I found very fascinating is, like, I mean, on the one hand, we now know how those 5 Zerugal that get killed by Ublala and Iron Bars and so forth at the end of Midnight Tides, we know how they came in into the Azath house in Umto's Felak, which also explains that the location of Umto's Felak in the Carcanas trilogy is actually the place where Letheras will be in the far future. So really cool that as well. Also explains why there's Jaghut towers around an Azath house, right? You know, it kind of all makes sense sometimes, which is cool. One thing that I found fascinating, so we have that one Thalakai who is really into killing Senegal because they're obnoxious bastards. And she talks to Hood about her son. We don't know her son's name, but we learn that he is fishing Denravi for whatever reason, close to the High King's realm. And Hood says he sees him standing near the High King or in the High King's shadow. Now, I'm wondering if her son is, because her name is Erikal or something like that. I'm wondering if her son is Eriko out of, the novels of the Malazan Empire, companion of Dasim Ultor as Wanderer and Kyle, him of the fearsome mustache, and all these other people. Just I don't know, random thought that I have. We will see where that whole thing is going. We also finally meet a Jakut shaped Azathanai. and learn that Hood's waiting is actually not just waiting, because we're still trying to figure out that whole idea of like where do the dead go? What's the realm of the dead? How do you actually fight war against death? And everyone is thinking that they'll just like go somewhere and then find death, I guess. You know, the whole crossing a river and so forth kind of thing. Which, like, interesting aside, there's a Call of Atlantis story which isn't even finished, like a fragment, where Cole kind of crosses that mythical river with his army to ride into the west. Is it the west or the east? I keep forgetting. Well, he crosses that place and comes into that magical land that might just be death or not. So I'm wondering if that might have been like some kind of inspiration on like a very sword and sorcery esque idea, like the idea of actually going to war against death, in a way. I don't know, just you know, throwing things out there. Also, go read King Cole of Atlantis by Robert E. Howard. Those are great stories, actually. Really, I kid you not. Uh, apart from that, um, what else did I want to say about it? Yes, the idea is that through whatever powers that are now coming to life in that world that is Corel Galen and other places, which is kind of interesting that you have all these realms that are kind of next to each other in a weirdly undefined way, I guess. And I'm looking forward to find out how all of that actually ends up, like, works out in the end. To, you know, because we learn that, like, Corel Galen, or at least Carcanas, is definitely a different hold or place or world than, say, the world plane or whatever you want to call it that Letheras ends up in, or Amtos Felak. Those are all different places, and some of them are. So apparently, right now you can just ride from one to the other without opening gates. So I guess the whole gate thing that our buddy Draconis started when he nailed down that Turandai and nailed down the Gate of Darkness. That will lead to more gates popping up all over the place, and maybe building worlds around themselves in a way. We'll see how all of that works, but we also learned obviously that from the Turandai and Corcanis, darkness is bleeding out, making more parts of Corel Galen actually dark. Whereas you have the light streaming out from that place where Urisenda hangs out, which has a name that I always keep forgetting. But never mind. That is becoming something like Corel Liosa, I guess. Now, how one of those ends up having more than one son and stuff like that that we see later on in, say, Dust of Dreams, I have no idea, but I guess it will all be explained. I am confident that will be the case. Anyway, so the idea is that that Hood kind of draws, makes the dead and makes the realm of death come to him, which is a neat trick. So those places will at some point connect or crash into each other or collide or whatever you want to call it. That's when he start his war, in whatever way that war will actually work out. I guess we'll learn more about it later on in the book, so I'm looking forward to find out. In the meantime, we have Korea being passed on as a hostage to House Drakons, and thus in the care of Erethan, who will be sent away by Gothos. And Hood, against his will be sent back to Corel Galen to take Korea with her, and we'll see where that whole thing will end. I can already see those two really. I mean, they're already annoying each other like hell. So we all know how that kind of thing ends. They'll either be best friends or lovers relatively soon, I guess. We'll see how that. Just a guess. That's just like how those kind of dynamics work out in real life, if not in books. Um, I love the idea of the suicide note being started with the day that Gothos ended this, the Gothos Folly, like being started with the day where he ended civilization and going backwards to his birth, which is like 3 or 4 millennia ago. So there's, it will never really end. Yeah, we also see Gethel. Later on, Herald of Hood. Interesting how that will be. And then later on, even Herald of the Crippled God come out of an Azath house. And ain't that fun? Well, he seems to be kind of pissed. But we'll see how that all works out in the end. We also learn that this will be interesting to see because they meet the former guardian of the Azath house, and he's an undead dog runner, whom I assume I'll take as given will become the Imas later on. So they'll. That one was the guardian of that house, and he was slain by the Jakut in their attempts to figure out shit. But we know from Reaper Scale or Dust of Dreams, probably the beginning of Dust of Dreams, we know that the guardian of the Azath house later on is Shokrol Asael or Forokan. So I guess we might actually learn who will actually be that guardian of the Death House, not Death House, but Azath House, maybe later on in Fall of Light or Walk in Shadow, because a new guardian has to actually enter that place at some point. Anyway, that's the kind of things that are happening there. I still like the idea of like Gothos writing his like autobiography backwards and finding like every reason, for his suicide that apparently never actually happens. And that's pretty cool. What else was there to talk about in that chapter? Actually, I'm not quite sure. I mean, there's more about like magic being like coming to the land and being available to more and more people, but that's something that we've spoken about before. And more people around Hood's camp also realize that. So that's something to keep like our eyes on. I mean, we already kind of know that Karul and his good buddy, beloved Skillandro, beloved by everyone, Skillandro, are trying to find dragons and force them to make some kind of deal. And we already know that from the Malazan Book of the Fallen that those dragons are will be aspected to different parts of Karul's blood to create the Warrens. We'll see how that all will work out in the end. But so far, that's not yet the case. So, I mean, like, a lot of that was just like fun to read the conversations between Koria and Arathan, with Koria being very, very definite about everything, and Arathan being a more dubious person that has very few like firm opinions in a way. I think just like the dynamic there is pretty good. The forthrightness of Koria versus the more like uncertainty of Arathan. Also the irreverence of Koria versus the more polite nature of Arathan. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of that. What else? Not much actually. It was also like a rather short chapter. We get the combat in the death house and stuff like that. So that takes a lot of it. Although, yeah, right. The part of the guardian of the death house says that like the dead want to be left alone and don't want anything to do with the realm of the living anymore. And I just like that aspect of it. I'm just wondering, at this point, how does that kind of underworld thing work? I mean, we know that there was like a Jaghut underworld in a way. When you remember that part from the Bone Hunters, when Ganas Paran rides his chariot over that bridge and everything. So there is something there, but probably no one in charge of that realm. We'll see where all of that will be going. In the future, also, yeah, probably more Azath and I because they're involved in everything at this point. It's like, but let's have us a look at what is going on in the outskirts of Corel Galen with Kagamander Tulas, with the Deniers who are now becoming grey. Who'd have thought it? So the splitting up of the Teist into Lyosan, Andii, and Edor has finally begun, and yeah, interesting to see when like some people that we still don't exactly that we know turn out to be actual Tist Teist Edor in later lives, how they will all become Teist. An interesting thing there is also the shake part of it. When we have the shake, the prophecy of that shake mother, and that calls not Shirina and Kado. Shirina Sankado is the other one. I'm so bad with names. Um, something something. Finara Stone. That's the one. Finara Stone. And when she calls her Twilight, um, we all know what that means. So I guess she's now entangled with the Shake and the whole Shake legend that is building up. Slowly, we have Yadan Narat, who keeps falling back into the person of Yadan Derek, which I still find very fascinating. Also, something that I find super interesting is that the fact that Yadan Derek is gay, which was just mentioned once in one sentence in the entirety of the Malaz Book of the Fallen, is much more present in this version, which also might just be because this time round we actually get more insight into Yadan Derek's head, even though it is like secondhand through the visions or dreams or whatever you want to call it of Yadan Narat. But we see him basically declaring war on at least the Taist Leosan, probably also the Taist Andii. We don't know yet because so far those have not yet wandered into the forest and are therefore not yet like enemies of the Deniers and those people. So he declares war, and that starts turning those people into the Taist Edor by making their skin gray. Which I still kind of like the idea of, or not like, but I am fascinated by the idea of like making their skin color identical with certain values or not values, or at least like standing in opposition to everything, which would make a shadow, which but is sort of in the middle between those two, but its own thing, and yeah, kind of interesting, as I said yesterday. So we see more of that going on. Um, and in the end, we see them. Well, we see them go out and kill the trackers sent out by Hunral to go and to kill Shirinas and Kadu. They think Shirinas is dead, but she's not. She uses some kind of magic because magic starts to be around everywhere to heal herself, and then becomes what you might call a cannibal or something more. Which I find interesting because her sister Sukul Ankadu, I think it's her, does the same thing, by which I mean eat humans at the time, in Letheras at some point at the beginning of Dust of Dreams. That should be. No, I think it's Dust of Dreams, where Bug or Male comes across her and she's just eating the lungs of a person she's killed, I think. So I don't know what it is with the Ankadu line, or that they are like into eating people. Or maybe I got it wrong and it was actually Shaltetha lore, but I think it wasn't. I think it was Sukul Ankadu who did the cannibal thing. But yeah, she can heal herself now, and she can eat. She doesn't actually mind eating Teist flesh at this point. So, well, weird. We'll see where that is going in the future. But she's still very much, thinks very much of Kagamandra Tulas, who has the funniest homecoming I've seen in a while, when he just first runs into those deserters of the wardens who don't recognize him, and then he comes home and finds out that he is settled with all the Jellican hostages by Silchas and Scarabandaris. And I think I might actually like to read a story out of like the the youth and friendship of those three when they were just like dumb soldiers and doing all kinds of stupid shit. That might just really be a lot of fun, I guess. Anyway, he settles and gets those people, and I just like found that part was just written in like a very humorous way, when you can, like, as a reader who knows way more, you can see all these things just coming from a mile off, and then it's just fun, right? um Also, we finally learned that at least one of them is called Gear, so my suspicion that those, at least some of those Jellican, will turn into the Hounds of Shadow. Yeah, I don't know how that will happen, because apparently they stopped just changing shape or veering from one into the other, so I don't know. But there's that. Interesting to see how that will turn out. I also love the fact that you have those like two wardens, a sergeant and her husband, who's like super like complaining all the time. You just like wait till the last scene when she just turns like, oh, what can you do, husbands? That was just like really really funny. I thought I enjoyed that. Same thing with the dragon in front of the fort of the winter fort of the wardens, with Ursa being jealous and pissed off by Spinok Durav, whom everyone wants to have get it on with. And then they going out, and the dragon outside veering into a Teist woman, which is Telerast, and we already know how that will be. Well, we don't know how it will end. Oh yes, we kind of do know how it will end. We'll just have to figure out what happens in between, and where her sister Curdle is at this point. But, well, wasn't that interesting to see that Telerast, even at this point, is already the same way. It's like, yeah, I just made this up. So yeah, we have that. We also see that apparently some of the jealousy and envy, or whatever, and hatred of Ursa towards Spinok Durav may just be because of his connection to the Queen of Dreams, who is now already called the Queen of Dreams, but obviously is Turis. So interesting to see how that will work in the future. So what else did I miss? As I said, there's like a lot of just like things happening that are building connections between them and the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and possibly the novels of the Malazan Empire. So I appreciated these like two chapters were mostly for me like figuring out what else is going on, like how these things connect. Whereas there was like, there weren't that many long like dialogues and stuff where a lot of things were discussed that went above like, hey, what the hell are we doing with like 20 shape-shifting wolves, and is there room for two Teist buddies in our meat in our meat cellar, maybe? Which, yeah, I get his impulse. um, so yeah, as I said, a much shorter talk today. I'll have more about the rest of Book 2 of Fall of Light tomorrow. And then maybe we'll wrap the whole thing up next week. I don't know. we'll see where things are going after that. Um, anyway, I thank you for watching and listening and so forth. And I'll talk to you tomorrow about more of it. And until then, cheers.